What's going on, all you beautiful people of the YouTube? Today I got called out to repair a garage door, and as you can see by me pointing it out right here, there's a good spring and then there's a broken spring, and that broken spring's just not going to cut it. So we're going to put a new set of powder coated springs up today. First thing we got to do though is get this broken spring out of the way. While I'm doing that, if you want to move on to another video, now's a great time to do so. If you want to hang out for my nonsense, then that's fantastic. I appreciate it if you hit that like and subscribe. Anyway, the broken spring is loosened up and the broke piece is out of the way, but we still have to unwind the spring that is not broken because it's still under tension. So we're going to loosen up the nuts on that, and then we're going to unwind it. Now, this takes about 3 minutes. There's a lot of people that do this a lot better than I do, and kudos to them, but this is how I get it done. Anyway, once I have that spring unwound, I can disconnect the two springs from the center point from each other and then get them both off the torsion tube that they are sitting on. What we're going to do is we're going to slide them right out of the way and right down to the end where I can pull the tube out of its location and pull the spring off. So before I can get the springs off, I've got to go to each end of the torsion tube and I've got to pull the drums and the cables out of the way. In order to do that, I'm going to loosen up two nuts on the drum, spin it around, and make sure I can slide it down the torsion tube well enough to get out of my way. I have to do this on both sides. That way I can slide that tube in through the end plates, out one side, drop some springs off, and then pull it back through and do the other side. So as you can see, I've got the drum loosened on both sides. I've got the cables off, and then with this drum out of the way, I'm gonna pull the torsion tube my way and pop it out. And then I'm gonna slide the drum out of the way and off with the broken spring. I'm on the right side right now, which is the side that the broken spring was on. What causes such thing as a broken spring, you may ask? Well, it could be old. It could be the wrong spring. It could have been used a gazillion times and it's just lost its ability to stay together anymore. Maybe it's a cheap spring. I'll run into all kinds of situations of why the spring is broken, but those are a few of them. It happens. It's a common thing, and it's like job security for a guy like me. Now we're going to throw up a new set of springs, and to do that, it's pretty much reverse of everything we just did. So I'm going to come up in here, I'm going to slide a bearing down the torsion tube, and then I'm going to throw my spring for the right side up on the right side, and I'm going to get the drum back in place, and then I'm going to slide the torsion tube in, and then I'm going to go to the other side and I'm going to do the same thing, and then we'll move on to the next step. So there is a little bearing that runs in the center, and there's a bearing on each end that helps the torsion tube to keep rotation as the door is going up and down. And I don't know if you caught it, but I said I'm putting the spring that goes on the right side. The springs have certain designations, meaning there's a spring for the right and there's a spring for the left. Also the drums, same thing. There's a drum for the right and a drum for the left. The drums are what the cables wrap around. If you put any of this on backwards, I've heard that it can create a real problem for you. My third cousin's, sister's, boyfriend's, uncle's dad, grandpa used to do garage doors, and I heard he put a pair of springs on backwards and then he wound them up and ended up with the door pretty much completely on the ground and about 4 hours of extended work for himself. But I don't know, that's just a story that I heard, down the line. Anyway, once we've got both springs and both drums back in place and everything is sitting where it should, we're going to reconnect the springs at the center bracket here with two 9/16 bolts. We'll get them in place, make sure that our torsion tube is not smiling or frowning and it's straight across and out of the way of the door so that everything's going to function properly. And then from there, we're going to have to put the tension back on these springs, which means I'm going to take my winding rods right here and I'm going to wind the springs up. Now, you see they were lettered across the springs, and you see those letters are now turning into little spirals across the spring. That's a counter. That's how I count how many times that I have turned the spring and how much tension. And I do that per size of the door. how many notches I want to count there. Anyway, I'm going to tighten the right side down that I'm working on here. Now, once I have one spring tightened, I'm going to have to go on over and I'm going to put one cable on one side, and I'm going to go over and I'm going to put another cable on the other side before I move on to tightening the second spring. Now, these cables in these drums are what keeps the torsion tube pretty much from just free spinning and unwinding your springs. Without them, your springs would not stay wound. That's why I have that little rod still shoved into my spring holding it in place until I get these two cables in place. The springs and the cables work together to lift and lower the door. The door would be super heavy for you to be doing it all the time on your own without these two components. The cables are connected to the drums in the torsion tube, and then they slide down and they're connected to the bottom of the door. So once the door starts to come up, the torsion tube is spinning, springs are spinning, and the same thing when you're going down. It all works together. These are what I would consider the moving parts of your garage door. The only other moving parts you have are your rollers. And sometimes we replace those when we do what's called a garage door overhaul, where we replace all the moving parts. And even though the boss man would probably like me to do a door overhaul on every door, it's just not necessary all the time. Sometimes there's new rollers already in place. Sometimes there's already new cables in place. Sometimes people just don't want to spend the money to have done the springs in the first place, and they definitely don't want to spend the money to do all the extra stuff that is not a necessity per se. Anyway, once we have everything wound and tightened down, the door is going to be functional, and we're just going to give it a little test and make sure the door is sitting well balanced, meaning I'm going to be able to lift the door. First off, it's going to be easy to lift. It should be nice and light, but it should not be a rocket. I should not lift it off the ground and then all of a sudden it shoots up and through the end of the track and then through the ceiling and possibly into the living room. That's not balanced. You want to be able to lift it nice and easy. It's going to want to set in place like halfway, set in place all the way at the top, and you want to be able to, have it set off the ground when it's about 2 foot off the ground. Anyway, everything's looking lovely. The door lifts lovely, and you're all lovely. Have a lovely day.